Really, I was inspired by this simple paragraph. It's just really fired my imagination, and I wanted to try and replicate that. You know, the challenge of finding the hostel, the location of it, and just the sense and the feel of what it could have been like arriving at a hostel after a long day's cycling. So I'm doing as much prep with this search as possible. So if I go back to the archive document, I've got a grid reference there, which I can now feed into a grid reference finder. There you go, I've already put it in. Hey, great, look, it shows me there's definitely some buildings there present day. And the great thing about this now, I can zoom out, get more of a feel. Now that sort of corresponds with the written description. She talked about going through a field, the steep rocky climb up through some dank woods, and then across an open field. So this all confirms it. What I can also do, the great thing about this, I can also get map images. Sometimes that just shows more clarity. It simplifies everything. So that's where I'm going to be heading up. There's Hamlink across to the village of Barrington there. Just gives me a feel, a less complicated feel. Go back to this satellite image. There's another little trick I use as well. If I drag the pegman over across, I make straight away sort of see, look, the pegman goes blue. That means the car hasn't been up there taking imagery. But what I can do, look, is go to the nearest place it did get and get a street view. So straight away I can sort of see that there's a drivable track up to some residences by the look of it. If I turn it round, right, so I think that's where I'm going to be heading up there. When I get there, I'm going to straight away feel like I'm in familiar surroundings. At least when I get there, I've got a feel for the landscape straight away. So I find that when I'm motorcycling, if I'm looking for somebody's address, I'll quite often street view it first. So when I get there, I'm not holding up traffic. I've got a feel for familiarity for the surroundings. So I find that helps a lot. And then I can go back and sort of almost follow the description. So there she goes. She's talking about a steep climb up through dank woods, and that hairpin there would suggest it's quite steep up through the woods. She definitely talks about going across an open field before just getting to the hostel. So yeah, I feel a lot more confident in finding it now, having done this. So this entry starts by saying it lay somewhere between Blagden and Barrington. So I'm just leaving the village of Blagden now, and it continues. It says, and soon the road dropped steeply out of sight into the valley below. So I'm guessing they came this way, headed that way, and this could well be the steep drop down in the valley she is referring to. It's taken quite a few years for this all to come together, and I was doing a clear out recently, and that book actually turned up, and it re-sparked my sort of curiosity really. And I did a bit of researching over the weekend, and I came across Mabel Pratt's description. It's really made me want to come and try and relive the journey. So I've printed out the directions from the handbook, and straight away there's something that puzzles me a little bit. There's 3 main ways to reach the hostel. One of them is for walkers only, so but the other one, this one, that I believe she took, and I'm trying to retrace and recreate, starts at the bottom at Rigford, which is where I am now, and works its way up to quite a high elevation. Interestingly, the handbook says cyclists are advised to take Barrington Combe car park at the top. So in other words, they're advised to start at the top and work their way down. So straight away sort of said, you know, was just lack of experience, or was it deliberate, or was it accidental? And I got reason to believe she was quite experienced, and a mature and experienced traveller. I'll probably explain why later, but that is just an assumption. So to come to the village of Rickford, you need to turn off the main road. Now I'm just literally going to do a loop around to the left there. It rejoins the main road, and right opposite is the minor road up towards the youth hostel. I've just come up from Rickford, back on the main road, and I'm right opposite Rickford Rise, so I'm going to be heading up that no through road. So I'm now at the spot where I looked at on Street View yesterday, where the Google car came up as far as you can sort of see. There's some building work going on up here, so there's vans up this far, but I'm now at the spot where it turns into a track, and I'm at that outbuilding. Looks disused. There's references to 10-point painted signs to help sort of hostelers find their way. And, you know, just straight away, I wonder if that was possibly one of them. That can only ever be a guess. Yeah, so here's the way I'm going to be heading. And yeah, there are a couple of residences up here. There's at least one more around here. I'm about to go around a sharp bend, and I think that's where I'm going to rise up through the tree. So yeah, when I first came across this paragraph, it just looked, oh, that looks helpful, and I read it and I reread it, and then I sort of slept on it overnight, and I thought about it, and I thought, actually, there's a lot of information in here. So many questions which I don't think I'm going to answer them, and I don't know if I want the answers either. My other sort of first question was, I wonder if she's by herself, in a couple, or a pair, or in a group. It says here it was uphill and we were soon pushing our cycles. That's what I'll be doing in a minute. Then it entered to a rough track unmarked where we are now, which we were told was the right of way. So they encountered someone here. She's referred to we and our. So it sounds like they asked for reassurance, and again I'm starting to relate to her really. There's always that feeling, especially at the end of a long journey, when you're tired, and if you're entering sort of remote territory, you're sort of wondering, am I on the right track? Is this a wild goose chase? Am I going to have to turn around and go back? So, you know, just sort of seeing signs or having it confirmed by a local that you're on the right track is always reassuring. So I sort of straight away got some empathy here. So, like I said earlier on, I don't think it was a mistake she came this way. And she wasn't alone, whether it is with, I don't know, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, or in a group, I just don't know. So I'm going to carry on following the instructions and maybe give a few thoughts on the way up. So immediately go over cattle grid, and there's some farm buildings here. Interestingly, there's an arrow which reminds me of the pointed directions. So I like to sort of think there's a bit of similarity to this journey. And yes, she was heading to a defined place, and she would know when she got there whether it was the right location, and also there were pointed markers. I don't have that, but what I have got is the benefit of research and technology. I've got plenty of printed research. I've done a lot on the internet, street viewed it, googled it. I've got my sat nav as well, so you know, probably it's more advantageous. But I think when I get there, whether I identify which is the building or not, I don't know. So yeah, another post there. Whether that was part of a youth hostel sign, I'm just guessing here, but there's plenty of signposts for walkers. And so after a few hundred yards coming up through these woods, you can see there's a track down there to a habitation. Again, interesting, another post there. Was that a marker up to the hostel? That's certainly the way I'm heading. So I've just come up through the wood. I've passed over a cattle grid here onto the open area she refers to. What occurred to me coming up there was, every time I stop to film or look at the instructions, you keep thinking, oh yeah, I could probably get back on a ride this. Certainly anybody on mountain bike can do it. I got the advantage of being on 26-inch wheels, hybrid bikes, so most of that was rideable for me. I chose to actually walk it because I just didn't want to miss any clues. So the description carries, a little further on was another youth hostel sign. Still no sign of habitation met the eye. As the track dwindled to stones and mud, that's the section I've just come up through, it led through a dank wood and out onto an upland full of bracken. So that's this here. She mentions a dank wood. I didn't really think that was dank. It's quite airy, but then, you know, this was September. It could well have been very wet, or, you know, just the management of the forest could be just completely different. It's, you know, we're both doing it in September, just 69 years apart. She continues, we followed what might still be a single track through bracken onward and ever upward, the view growing more lovely. Just get a feel of real honesty, you know. There's no ego here at all. It's just quite really nicely written. Over the field we went and down a slope to a house and outhouses. Thinking up near those woods there. So here we are at the top of the field, another cattle grid. No stone wall that she refers to, but she did say it's broken, so it suggests may have been in its dying days. Instead it's posted and wire fenced, but I think can assume this is it. It's just which of these residences it was really. Going to go in, as long as I'm not trespassing, try and find some more clues. But the reviews she refers to, looking back, pretty amazing really. Very hazy today, atmospheric, but again she was here in September, so it could well have been the same for her and her companion or companions. Loads of wildlife up here. I don't know if you can see that bird running across. Plenty. Signs of autumn everywhere. So that is the one I've just been up there. It's called Keeper's Cottage, so it's either one of these two. It was that one there, Keeper's Cottage, and the description I read on from the archives was about this tin hut that had been transported down from Dursley Youth Hostel to be the male accommodation. I don't know if I'm just stretching my imagination to wonder if that was it, but she certainly says on arrival, over the field we went, down a slope to a house and outhouses. In brackets, the men's dorm was a small army hut in the yard. The women's dorm was one of the house bedrooms, mullioned windowed, and panorama of the rolling valley spread out far below. I'm not sure what mullioned windowed meant, so I looked it up. It means a traditional stone window. She says the house was about a 4-bedroomed, one solidly built in stone, and presided over by a lady warden. No meals provided, and that was it. Mabel Pratt, September 1948. So 69 years later, in September of 2017, here we are. Beautiful, stunning location. I think myself I'd have probably had a couple of doubts going up to that wood, appearing too remote, and was I on a wild goose chase, so I think the signs would have been reassuring. It really reminded me of Minehead Youth Hostel recently. I first went there with Linda, and I think I referred to it on my last video, one of my previous videos, about the taxi drivers don't like going up there. Having said that, I've just been passed by one of the, I guess it's one of the inhabitants up here, just drove down in a normal car. So yeah, there's a wonderful feeling about accomplishing your goal, you know, reaching your destination, especially when it's in such a grand setting, and you know, the physical exertion of actually getting there. And so I can sense some of that. I would love to arrive here now, spending the night in there. So what made me say earlier on that I thought she's quite an experienced, mature traveller? Well, there's, in the YHA archives that I accessed through Birmingham University site, there's actually another description of when she went to Ashton Keynes Youth Hostel. Funny enough, it was in April of the same year, 1948, and it just, this one, there's slight frustration in there, but also the fact that they've learnt from previous experience to carry food. So it's, if you sort of think of the context, this is 1948, although the war's been over a few years, you know, it's still austere times. You know, food rationing, for example, didn't end until July 1954, and so she says food is scarcer than it was at hostels last year, and unless one has booked ahead, wardens are apt to register dismay when asked for supper and breakfast by the unexpected hosteler. So it suggests that she had turned up at a previous hostel and, you know, incurred the wrath of a warden. We therefore carry beside lunch for the road enough to be self-cookers if required. So, you know, they've come prepared. The hostel was once a farmhouse. It can take about 50 all told, but tonight it houses only 4 birds of passage. We cooked our supper on oil stoves, read by lamplight, and were warmed by a log fire, so it suggests there was no electricity or anything there, modern facilities. But yeah, it just comes across as an experienced traveller. So yeah, original purpose of this trip was to actually try and recreate the journey and, you know, the feeling of accomplishment, which I think I've succeeded in that. It feels really, to me, but also I sort of became curious and inquisitive about who Mabel Pratt was and why there's these references to her in the YHA archives. So I can tell you what I know, and then I can tell you what I think I know. So first of all, what I know is the YHA archives are held, as I said earlier on, at Birmingham University, and they refer to her diaries, and there's a reference to her under the section Quakers, Socialists and Philanthropic Influences, so she's one of those three. This visit would have been 69 years ago. Now here's where I've got to do a little bit of detective work. So a further search for the Mabel Pratt diaries throws up this one from Bodleian Library, the University of Oxford. There's limited access here, so I can only give you the very cursory sort of explanation, and it may not be the same Mabel Pratt, but if it is, the coincidence is too great for two Mabel Pratts to have been writing diaries in that era. But you know, it may not be the same Mabel Pratt. So the Mabel Pratt from the University of Oxford Library was born in 1899, died in 1986, and her diaries were donated to the library by Mabel Pratt's daughter in 1987. So again, they were donated. It gives me that giver not a taker sort of personality, which sort of ties up the Quaker socialist and philanthropic aspect that I do know is of her. So if this is the same Mabel Pratt, she would have been 49 years old at the time of this visit, which again suggests, you know, maturity. She's been writing diaries since 1938, so she's already been travelling 11 years. And that sort of, again, that would sort of confirm the visit to Aston Keynes. You know, she's experienced. It said the scope and content of these diaries, it says on the home page at the Bodleian Library, says holiday diaries, with some sketchbooks of Mabel Pratt, mainly in England from 1938 through to 1968. Most of the diaries contain numerous accomplished pen and ink or watercolour drawings, mainly architectural or topographical, with some photographs, memorabilia and biographical notes on the author. And the fact she lived to 87, the age of 87, for someone born in the early 1900s, that's quite a long life. Yeah, so this other link, this may seem a little bit tenuous, but I wasn't sure what mullion windows meant, and I actually had to look that up, so that might just be me. But the fact that possibly the other Mabel Pratt, she did mainly architectural and topographical drawings, so that suggests that she would have known actually. So that's about as far as I could access. Any further you need permission, and that's when it starts feeling intrusive. I've sort of answered my curiosity. I'm satisfied with what I know, and I've just told you what I think I know. Can't definitely confirm that. As I said, I walked up looking for clues, and I was doing my reading on the way up. I'm going to try and ride down, but my God, first thing I really realised turning in the opposite direction is that view. It just blows me away actually. Okay, so I'm heading back down to where that outhouse is. I'm going to take the left-hand gravel track called Ham Link, and that'll take me along to the garden centre right next to Burrington Inn, where I'm going to stop and have a pint. So I'm sat with a drink now in the Burrington Inn. So why did I do this today? First of all, as a hostler, I was always intrigued to know where the location of the hostel was. Once I first discovered there was a hostel there, I started thinking, oh, it's probably over there, or there, and I was just completely wrong. And then I started to realise the remote location, and it just became almost a challenge really. And recently, because of my eyesight, I went over to electronic navigation, Strava and Garmin. It's because I was finding maps and route sheets harder and harder to read as my close-up vision got worse and worse. So it's great, it's opened up a whole new world for me, and I embrace it totally. What I did realise about a year ago, I was motorcycling through somewhere else on a bit of business, and I just lost all my navigational skills. I'd always been quite good at sort of getting my bearings and my surroundings, especially out of towns, and I realised that had actually gone. I thought about it afterwards, and you know, I sort of thought that's probably because I've sort of relied on the technology too much. And so that was another aspect of this really. I wanted to try and test my map reading and navigation skills, and not just one or the other. I wanted to use modern technology and old technology, so you know, to knit the two together. So that was another reason.